Welcome to the Crush It in Sales podcast. I'm your host, Melinda Van Fleet. This podcast focuses on the intersection of sales, leadership, and personal development. Now let's get ready to dig in and crush it. In this episode, I want to share with you my own little personal tool that I have had for years. And it probably started off unintentional and has just grown to be intentional and for me to be very mindful of it over the years and actually share it with others. I definitely share it with my coaching clients and I share it with my husband as a tool. And once you start to use different tools and tips, they obviously become habits, which is always a great thing and a great way to improve your life and your business. So this tool and tip that I have for you this week is in regards to putting your clients and even people in general into different buckets. And what my buckets are might not work for you, obviously. We are all different. But I will try to briefly explain what my buckets are in relations to a client, and you can then obviously fine tune or tweak, however you want to put it, how you would view your buckets and your parameters around each of them. So here we go. Bucket A is the client to have. This is your dream client, your prized possession client, your favorite client. This client drives the highest percentage of your sales volume, of your growth, is for the most part extremely easy to work with, gets back to you, is clear in communication. It's just a pleasure. There's really nothing that you would probably change about this client. Or there might be something slightly that kind of annoys you. Maybe it's the way they communicate, or maybe they're awesome communicators, but their volume just isn't that big. But one hand washes the other, and you still love them anyways, and you're still very appreciative of them, and you wouldn't trade them for the world. That is client A. And I'm always hopeful that we all have a good amount of client A's. Now, client B, the B bucket, this is where it gets a little more tricky. This is where something might be going on with the client. Let's say their sales aren't as great, or their communication isn't as great and they annoy you, or things bother you, however you want to put it. And something needs to be done. You don't want to lose them. You still treasure them. You still are appreciative of them. You don't want to lose their business. But something needs to be done because it's getting into your head. Some of those scenarios could look like this. One could be maybe there's something that you can be doing better. Maybe there's communication that you could be better at. Maybe you could be better at working with them on their sales needs, on what they have going on in their business, and fine-tuning any type of relationship or business needs from your end. Or there's some way that you can communicate with them to help them and maybe in a polite way show them what they need to be doing in order to work better with you, i.e., setting boundaries. So, for example, a simple example could be that you have a customer in this bucket, in the B bucket, that is constantly texting you at all hours of the night, in the morning, early, not clear communication, which seems to be very common nowadays. So I do believe that a majority of sales reps are dealing with the texting communication going on from some of their clients and customers. So you have to figure out how you're going to set boundaries around that. Are you going to set boundaries where you are only working from 9 to 6, Monday through Friday, for example? if this is something that bothers you. Maybe it doesn't bother you. Maybe you're totally okay with it, and that's awesome. But if it does bother you and you need to set some boundaries, then that's something that you have to figure out a way to communicate and let them know. So, for example, I'll use myself as an example. I am not a night person. So yeah, if someone starts to communicate with me after 6:00, I used to try really hard to get back to them still and be on point. But honestly, I found that, you know what, quite frankly, I was kind of grouchy. So it actually didn't even serve the client that I was trying to get back to them late at night, because I wasn't my super sunshine self. I was kind of like in the bitter barn that I was making that call. So as the years went on, I realized I have a really great relationship with this person. And why not just tell them that, hey, you're more than welcome to leave me a message after 6:00, but I'm probably not going to get back to you to the next morning because I'm just not a night owl. I'm a morning person. I'm more fresh in the morning, and that is going to be a better time for me to get back to you and have a clear head and be able to address whatever situation is going on. So setting boundaries is important for the person in bucket B. Now bucket C. This is the really difficult one, because bucket B is about realizing what you can let go and be fine with, and you just need to get over mentally and get out of your head, or learn to set boundaries and have better communication and build that relationship. But bucket C, this is the tough one. This is the one where you have to do a hard look in the mirror and be like, okay, I know that I have done everything in my power to be an awesome sales rep, to build relationship, to service, to have the great communication, be organized. But this person, I'm going to be honest, is just a nightmare. And whenever I work with them, it really gets under my skin. Because we all have those mental things that go on and on and on in our brain. And you want your brain to be free and clear of all that. You want to just live with ease and have a free and clear day and be able to truly crush it and knock it out of the park. And you have all these other things to worry about. You don't need to be worrying about that one customer that is driving you mad. But this is the tricky part. They're probably not going to change. They're really not going to change. You can't change everybody. And if you've fixed what you need to fix, if you've done the best that you can do, and like I said, you've looked in the mirror and you know that you've done the best you can do and you have tried your hardest, but it's really them, that's when you have to make the call. I have found that having some fellow sales reps to talk to kind of bounce off, hey, do you know this person? Have you had experiences with this person before? Or it could be your company. Your company could have a customer sales team, and that person has called in before, and there's people on your customer service team. They're like, oh, yeah, we know that person. And I've had that happen before too. So it's kind of nice if you have a little bit of a backup and you know it's just not you and it's really the other person, then that kind of helps give you a little bit more confidence that you might need to move on from working with that person. And that's the worst case scenario, but I have to be honest, it does happen. I had it when I first started in sales. I remember calling this store. I was calling everyone on my list, and I called this store, introduced myself. I was super excited, passionate. I'm like, I'm, just going to come see you. I just want to shake your hand and say hi and see your store. And she started screaming at me. She was screaming at me so loudly that my husband could hear. And he's like, what is going on? And she was screaming at me because she just, was in a bad mood, felt like I was being nosy. I have no idea to this day. But after a year of really trying to work with her, I actually had to not work with her anymore. I had to walk away and find a replacement. And that is part of C. That's the hard reality. That's the realness that sometimes, unfortunately, you might have a client that is in the C bucket. And what I have found consistently over time and consistently from talking to other sales reps is that person is not a big customer. They're normally a small customer. They're normally the smallest on your food chain. They're normally not the person who is really driving sales for your company or yourself. They're not the person whose sales you are going to miss if you stop working with them. And now you're like, oh, shoot, that person paid my rent or my mortgage. That is typically not it. There might be some cases that there it is, but typically what I have found over the years that it's not. And so moving on from that person ends up being a good thing because then you can focus more on working with your A bucket and even your B bucket, which is truly where your sales volume and your strength and the money and the other opportunities come from. I have found that through the years, and confidently through the years, because of that, I've been able to look in the mirror each time when I've had to make that decision and felt okay about it. And honestly, I've never looked back. I've never once regretted and being like, oh, shoot, I really should have kept working with that person. It's never happened. I don't know what you want to call that, but it's really not. Luckily, it hasn't been huge. It's a very small percentage. If you look at the amount of business I do, the amount of people I work with, it's very small. But that also goes to say that that very small percentage, if I was still working with them and that person was still in my head, that would hurt the rest of my business. And I would be focusing my time on working with that person versus focusing my time and my energy and my mental strength on working with the A's and the B's. So again, however you want to do your buckets, whatever parameters you want to set around it, I've just found that through the years, this has been a really great tool for me. It's been a really great tool, not only in business, but in personal life, in looking at various situations you might have to deal with, whether it's your friends, neighbors, family, whoever. Like we all have challenging situations with people all the time. You have to realize, is this person awesome? And you just keep going. Is this a B player that you might have to tweak a little bit, tweak either your mindset or how you behave, or maybe there's some great communication you can have back and forth with the person to come across a common ground and collaborate or compromise, however you want to work the situation out. But often the B player can definitely become an A player in time. Or there's the C bucket or the C player that you just need to walk away from. And it's okay. You're not alone. We've all been there. This coming week, I'm going to be interviewing someone who I think is truly amazing, an entrepreneur. And so I don't want to count any chickens before they hatch, but definitely stay tuned for my next podcast number 3. And I just really am looking forward to speaking with her and then having her on my podcast. And if you're curious or interested in more personal development, more mindset, more spiritual growth, please feel free to check out my other podcast, the Good Karma Success Coach podcast. You can find it on the same platforms as this podcast. And you can also connect with me on Instagram, LinkedIn, or through my website, crushitinSales.com. Feel free to shoot me a DM or an email. I would love to hear from you. So please share this podcast with a friend, a family member, a coworker, an associate, or a client. I would love that. I always feel if my podcasts help one person each week, and then that person helps another person, and then that helps another person, then my mission and my intent for doing a podcast has served a purpose, and I really appreciate that. Feel free to rate on Apple Podcast, and also till next time, let's dig in and crush it. Thanks for listening.